What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you my first impressions of the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G. Now, as always, if you end up wanting to learn more about this phone, be sure to check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. Now, as the name does imply, the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G is the successor to last year's Samsung Galaxy A23 4G, and while of course this is not a 5G phone, I am expecting the A24 5G to come out later this year. Now with this phone, despite it not being officially launched in the US as far as I know, you can get it factory unlocked, and it does work with most US carriers. Now before we get too far into the phone itself, let's take a look at what comes in the box. So like most Samsungs, there's really not a whole lot in here, but we do have a SIM card removal tool. Then inside this little packet, we got a double-sided USB-C cable and a quick start guide. So yeah, keep in mind, this phone does not come with a wall adapter, so if you don't have one already, you will have to get one yourself. And honestly, this is really just as well, because I feel like at this point in 2023, most people are gonna have at least one wall adapter. And when it comes to wall adapters you typically get with a phone anyway, they're usually not very strong. They're like 5-10 watts. And keep in mind, the A24 actually does have 25 watt fast charging, so really you're probably going to want a stronger charger anyway. But again, keep in mind this phone doesn't have one, so if you don't already have a wall adapter, you will have to get your own. Now with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz Super AMOLED display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 396, and a 19.5:9 aspect ratio. So in general, I will say, I am really impressed with the display here. At 6.5 inches, it definitely is decently large, so no matter what you're doing, whether you're doing simple stuff like reading or maybe you're watching lots of videos or something like that, you will get a great experience regardless. Things are going to show up larger and be easier to see. And when it comes to the image quality, I was actually pretty surprised, because keep in mind this is more of an affordable 4G phone, and phones like this typically don't have the most amazing displays. But with the A24, again, we are getting a Super AMOLED, so the colors are going to be nice and vivid. Things are going to show up richer and be higher quality, so if you're doing stuff like playing games or watching a video where the image quality is a bit more important, you will get a better experience. And with the Super AMOLED, in general, the display tends to be a bit brighter, and the viewing angles are really good too. So if you're outside in the sun, for example, or really in any kind of bright area, compared to something like an IPS LCD, for example, this display is going to be a bit easier to see. With the 1080p resolution, we're also getting a nice, sharp, crisp image, so again, when it comes to stuff like watching videos where the image quality is a bit more important, you will get a great experience here. And with the 90Hz refresh rate, the movement on the screen is going to be a bit faster and smoother, making the phone feel more premium to use. So if you're looking for a more affordable 4G phone, but you still want a really nice display for consuming content, the A24 4G will be a great choice. Now for storage, the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G is getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so definitely plenty of storage here. For the average user, you're probably not even going to come close to filling this up. So no matter what you're doing, if you're someone who likes to put a lot of apps on your phone, or maybe you're taking lots of pictures, recording videos, stuff like that, regardless, for most people, you will have plenty of storage here. And at this point in 2023, while 128GB is definitely not uncommon in this price range, keep in mind, factory unlocked, this phone is around $185. In this price range, there are still plenty of phones that only have 64GB, so if storage is more important to you, this phone will be a great choice. For security features, the A24 4G does have face unlock and a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key, so definitely a great spot for a fingerprint scanner. I want to say for Samsung Galaxy A series phones, it's pretty common. Basically all of them have the same kind of design. But real quick, let's give it a try. There we go. One more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And again, remember, this phone does have face unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. And then taking a look at the camera setup here, with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G, up front, we got a 13 megapixel selfie camera. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. And then for video, this phone has a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so no 4K here, but considering this is more of an entry-level device, I'm really not that surprised. But in general, I do think this phone has a pretty good camera setup. Now, considering this is a first impressions video, I haven't actually used the camera yet, but just based on what I've seen from other Samsung phones this year, I am expecting the photo quality to be pretty good. Maybe not the most amazing quality, so if you're coming from like an older flagship phone for example, keep in mind the photo quality of phones in this price range is typically not on that level, but for everyday casual use, for stuff like social media, maybe you're sending photos to friends and family, something like that, I do think the camera here will get the job done. For the RAM and processor, with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G, again this is a 4G phone, this is not the A24 5G, which as of the recording of this video, that phone doesn't technically exist yet, but I am sure it's going to come out in a few months. So just keep in mind, if you are looking for something that has 5G connectivity, you will want to get a different phone. But in general, at this point in 2023, even though 5G is becoming, I feel like, more and more important as time goes on, you still can pretty easily get away with a 4G phone. I mean, it's not really that big a deal. So if you don't really care about 5G connectivity, but you still want a more affordable but still solid device, I do think this phone is a pretty good choice. Now, with this device, we are getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G99 processor. And in my experience, for what it is, especially considering this is only a 4G phone, the performance is actually pretty good. In fact, for that matter, for everyday daily use, for stuff like browsing the web, using social media, watching videos, even some mobile gaming and stuff like that, I feel like this phone is pretty much just as fast as any entry-level 5G phone. Now again, there's no 5G connectivity here, but if you're really just using your phone for more basic activities anyway, I do think for the most part, you will still get a pretty good experience here. Now I ran a benchmark test on this phone using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone, and then comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of where this phone stands performance-wise compared to your current device. But in general, I was actually pretty surprised by the performance here. Usually a 4G phone is not going to score anywhere near this high. So again, on one hand, of course, if you really want the best connectivity and the best performance you can get for the money, then of course you are going to want to go with a more modern 5G phone like, say, the Samsung Galaxy A34 or A54 5G. But if you're really just looking for something for those basic activities and you're not really concerned about 5G connectivity, then keep in mind, despite being a 4G phone, the A24 4G is not slow by any means. And I feel like for most people, for the things people are typically using smartphones for, the performance you're going to get with this device is really plenty good enough. For the battery, like pretty much every A-series phone, the A24 4G does have a 5000 mAh battery, and like I said earlier in the video, it also supports 25-watt fast charging. And again, keep in mind, this phone does not have a wall adapter at all, so you will have to get one, and considering it does have 25-watt fast charging, I recommend getting a 25-watt fast charger, so that way you can fully utilize the fast charging. But in general, the battery here is great. With a 5000 mAh battery, you can expect to get really good battery life, and then down the road as the battery degrades, which of course all batteries do, with a battery like this compared to a much smaller battery, you're not going to notice it nearly as quickly. So if you like to keep one phone for a longer time without having to replace it, this will be a great choice. But honestly, keep in mind at this point in 2023, I want to say the vast majority of phones, especially mid-range phones, are going to have 5000 mAh batteries anyway, so it's not like it's super unique or anything, but in case you are worried about battery life, just keep in mind, you're definitely not going to go wrong with this phone. For the software, the A24 4G does have Android 13, so definitely great to see there. And with Samsung software support, you can also expect to get Android 14, 15, 16, and 17. So if you are someone who likes to have the latest version of Android, and maybe you want to keep your phone for multiple years and still get the updates, in that case, this phone, or really any Samsung phone for that matter, will be a great choice. And keep in mind, besides Samsung, not very many other manufacturers have software support like this. Google is pretty close, in fact I think it's pretty much the same. But when it comes to stuff like Motorola and OnePlus for example, they are getting better but they're still not nearly as good. So in general, if software support is more of a priority for you, then this phone will be a great choice. And when it comes to other features, the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G does have NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, keep in mind, you can use that feature on this phone no problem. Now taking a look at the overall design, on one hand it definitely doesn't look bad at all, but on the other hand it's really nothing special. I feel like it looks almost exactly like the A34 5G, which in and of itself doesn't really look unusual either, but it does still look decently modern. Aside for the slightly thicker bottom bezel, the other bezels are pretty thin, and overall the build quality is pretty good. Now with this phone, I'm really not a fan of this back material. I mean, the rainbow effect is kind of cool, but as you can see, there are lots of fingerprints and they really show here. So I feel like a matte material, kind of like they had with the A34 5G, would have been a bit better. But in general, I feel like most people are probably going to use a case anyway, so it's most likely not that big a deal. And then again, as far as the materials go, they do feel pretty decent. Obviously the phone is made entirely of plastic, but it does have an okay amount of weight to it, so definitely doesn't feel cheap or anything. And keep in mind, luckily this phone does have a headphone jack, which Samsung has been doing away with on a lot of the A-series phones, so in case you were worried about that feature, as you can see, it does have one. But in conclusion, my overall first impressions of the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G. In general, I feel like for what it is, This phone is actually a lot better than I expected. In case I didn't mention it before, at full price it's going for around $185 US factory unlocked. And for that price, even though when you factor in stuff like carrier deals, it might not be the best deal. When you consider a phone you can get factory unlocked, I mean, this phone has a great display, plenty of storage, a really nice camera, a large battery, NFC, great software support, and despite only being a 4G phone, it does also have a surprisingly fast processor. So in general, if you're looking for a more affordable 4G phone, but you also want your phone to be well-rounded and really just generally great for basic daily activities, then I do think this phone is definitely worth considering. But this concludes my first impressions video for the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G. Again, if you want to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.